Hey, what's up, folks? It's John Literal, host of JohnLiteral.com. Today is February 9th, 2024. And this is part 3 of the series that I'm doing on the Illuminati's plan to abolish all religion. And part 1, I talked about the origins of this cult. You know, they've been around since ancient times. They were the ones that controlled these ancient civilizations, going all the way back to Sumer, ancient Egypt, ancient Babylon. And, I talked about how this cult, through the Roman Empire, they tried to destroy Christianity. Jesus came along, brought about this new revolutionary way of thinking that took away a lot of power from the ruling class, that made people aware that they were sovereign beings under the moral laws of God. And God is their lawmaker, God is their judge, and so this didn't mesh real well with the ruling class and this cult, and it caused the cult a lot of problems back then. So, the cult tried to destroy Christianity and kill Christians off, but that just made it even worse for them because Christianity spread even more, and so. They found the best way to combat Christianity was to infiltrate it and co-opt it. And that they did. Through Constantine, they created Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, that institutionalized Christianity. And so, they controlled the world. They had a lot of power through this institutionalized Christianity. The papacy especially were working with monarchies and kings and queens, and so there were, like I said, there was a lot of power in that, and that was the power of the old world order. So then the agenda of this cult, they came up with this agenda for a new world order. And so they were able to accomplish that with Adam Weishaupt and the Bavarian Illuminati. And, that was to bring about a one world government. And so, they commissioned the Bavarian Illuminati to do that. And, they've been darn near got that, accomplished. They're almost there, but, there's still some, work to be done for them. If humanity doesn't wake up. But anyway, the old world order with kings and queens and monarchies and the power of the Catholic Church through the papacy, through the Vatican, that was just old-fashioned. That was standing in the way of ushering in the New World Order. There was parts of the rulers of the old world order that was very comfortable and happy with that form of control that they had. So the Illuminati, you'll find, went after monarchies and took them down. But the Catholic Church and the papacy was in the way of accomplishing this. And so there was a power struggle in this cult. So there was a couple prototypes that, or more than just a couple, some secret societies that the cult used to try to take away the power of the Vatican. And they were, like I said, they were prototypes of the Bavarian Illuminati. And so that's what part 2 was about. And I talked about the secret societies, a couple of them. And that was the Knights Templar and the Jesuits. And I was planning on actually talking about the next cult/secret society that played a part. And that was the Sabbatian-Frankists, but it took up a lot of time just talking about the Knights Templars and the Jesuits. But there were other secret societies that were prototypes of the Bavarian Illuminati as well. You had the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons. Now, these secret societies are still around. The Catholic Church banned them and everything else, but, they may have appeared to disappear, but they didn't. They just went deeper in the shadows, and some of the former members went into other secret societies and just kept doing what they were doing. But, part 3 here, I want to talk about the Sabbatian-Frankists. And so, you had Sabbatai Zevi. He was basically the founder of this. He, in 1666, he claimed to be the Jewish Messiah. And his followers are actually the predecessors of his descendants are still here today, called the Dhamma. And, they morphed into to Zionism and also Wahhabism. And I'll talk about that too. Then his Sabbatai Zevi's successor came a generation later, and his name was Jacob Frank. And he not only converted to Islam, but afterwards he converted to Catholicism. And so what you'll find is the Dhamma, followers of Zevi, they may have appeared to convert to Islam, but it was, that was a front. And they basically infiltrated it and co-opted it. And that's what Jacob Frank did as well when he converted to Catholicism. Jacob Frank was actually one of 3 figures that established the Bavarian Illuminati. Him, Adam Weishaupt, and Mayer Amstrad Rothschild. They established the Bavarian Illuminati in 1776. So you can see how this Sabbatian-Frankism, as you descend from the Templars to the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, and the Jesuits, and now this has kind of evolved, and another secret society, these Sabbatian-Frankists. And what these secret societies all have in common, they're all just, they overlap with each other. What they have in common is their so-called sacred book is the Kabbalah. And I'm not going to go into the Kabbalah in this video. It'll probably be part 5 or 6 when I'll have a lot to say about the Kabbalah, and also Rabbinic Judaism. The 2 main books for Rabbinic Judaism is the Babylonian Talmud and the Kabbalah. But there was a form of the Kabbalah that, starting in Bohemia, it was, a man by the name of Isaac Luria was the one that brought this new revolutionary conception of Zionism in. And, this was the purpose of the Jewish people in history. This would become the fundamental creed of these, of 2, important heresies at the time, of Jewish heresies. And it became the basis of Illuminati conspiracies. And so, you had Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank. Now, this Lurianic Kabbalah, which is also known as the New Kabbalah, is the most pivotal formulation in modern history of that occult branch of Judaism. And, it's prescriptions for actively seeking the fulfillment of prophecy. This became the core doctrine of the modern occult underground. So therefore, the Freemasonry, which it too was forged from the Lurianic Kabbalah and founded in the Rosicrucian conspiracy that united the divergent heritage of the House of Guelph and the House of Stuart, and was aligned in the 18th century with the most central development of the school when it was infiltrated by the Illuminati. And the goal of this organization was to fulfill the ancient dream of Plato, and so, of establishing a new world order governed by an elite instructed in the occult. So, the question of Jewish involvement or responsibility for scheming of the Illuminati, this has caused, investigators, anybody that goes to try to expose this and expose the Jewish involvement in the Illuminati, for New World Order, they refer to sometimes as the Jewish conspiracy. I don't normally use that terminology, but, some do, and the Jews play a part. Again, the way that especially these Sabbatian-Frankists combat it is they scream anti-Semitism. But Rabbi Marvin Antelman has really connected the dots and shown how this Jewish conspiracy is really a Sabbatian-Frankist conspiracy. And so now, according to Gershom Shalom, he said that the Lurianic Kabbalah became a dominant factor only about the year 1630 to 1640, and the ideology of the Sabbatian movement was closely connected with its development. And Shalom explained that the Sabbatian movement was the largest and most momentous messianic movement in Jewish history since the destruction of Jerusalem. So in 1666, Zevi, followed by his prophet Nathan of Gaza, proclaimed himself to be the Messiah of Judaism, and Zevi succeeded in rallying a large following, extending to nearly half of the Jewish population of the world at the time, including Jews from Palestine, Egypt, Eastern and Western Europe. And so the movement was shattered when, he was forced by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire to choose martyrdom or conversion. So, Zevi chose conversion to Islam. But that didn't go as well as what the Sultan wanted, because his religion of Islam actually was infiltrated by the followers of Zevi. Now, this Zevi's little prophet Nathan, this false prophet, he actually became a Roman Catholic. And so, the movement pretty well collapsed. And though, some of those that followed Zevi into conversion, there is, even down to the present time, an Islamic sect in Turkey that follows his teachings, and they're known as the Donma. And, they profess Islam outwardly, but, while holding to a mixture of traditional and heretical Judaism in secret. And so the Sabbatian heresy, which for some time survived in secret circles, akin to, something of a Masonic organization, eventually reasserted itself through the sect known as the Frankists. And they were also known as the Zaharists, or the Illuminated. And so, again, they originated as Sabbatian-Zevist. That's what they were called too. The leader of the Zoharist was Jacob Frank. He regarded himself as the reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi. And so, he revived the vilest, most disgusting form of Gnostic traditions of the Kabbalah. And the Frankists were bent not only on the eradication and the humiliation of the majority of the Jewish community, who refused to accept, his unorthodoxies, and therefore, of Judaism as a whole, but, he went after all religions. And he exploited the Zionist ideas to disguise their quest for world domination. Therefore, Sabbatai Zevi, he converted to Islam, but under different circumstances, whereas, Zevi was given a choice by the Sultan, either convert to Islam or be beheaded. But Robert Sefer said Sabbatai returned to Turkey, where the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire had already allowed the Zevi phenomenon to unfold for several years. The Sultan did not initially oppose Zevi's religious claims, probably because those claims brought in so much money from Jewish tourism, as Jews flocked to Turkey from all around the world, from England to Persia, Germany to Morocco, Poland to Yemen. Though, at first, the Sultan did not interfere with Sabbatai's movement. The last straw came, according to one of the many rumored accounts, when Sabbatai publicly proclaimed that in the next year the Temple of Jerusalem would be rebuilt. So the Sultan took offense to that, and most commonly accepted version of the story is that the Sultan offered Sabbatai Zevi the choice of either publicly converting to Islam or being beheaded. So, Sabbatai converted publicly, but he still practiced his occultism underground. So obviously, this backfired against the intentions of the Sultan because, like I said, the religion had become infiltrated by Zevi and his followers. And they infiltrated in Islam, and eventually it manifested into the Saudi royal family, an extreme British Saudi version of Islam known as Wahhabism. Oops, sorry. And now David Icke says, this is the religion of the extreme suppression of women and beheading non-believers and infidels. Western Saudi-funded armed and trained terrorist groups like ISIS are the most famous manifestations, along with the fascistic Saudi state itself. Wahhabism set the new blueprint for how Islam is perceived, both by many of its followers and the wider global public. From this came the perception that Islam is about death and destruction. Majority of Muslims are not violent. By contrast, Wahhabism is anything but kind. It is a brutal, merciless, deeply psychopathic, and supremacist creed that appropriately mirrors in its mindset the Sabbatian-Frankist death cult. And a quote by David. So, the Donma in Turkey officially converted to Islam in 1683, and the Frankists converted Europe to Catholicism in 1759. However, their conversion to the religions was for the purpose of imitating the Sabbatian role models, as well for subverting and destroying these faiths. And so Gershom Shalom summarizes the 5 distinguishing beliefs of radical Sabbatianism, which are essentially beliefs that 1, apostasy of the Messiah is a necessity. 2, real Torah is not the real Torah, and must be violated by conforming to another superior, alien mystic Torah called the Torah of aristocracy. And 3, first cause and the God of Israel are not the same, the former being the God of rational philosophers and the later the God of religion. 4, the Godhead takes human form, which allowed for leaders of the sect to be incarnated into that Godhead, from Sabbatai Zevi through Frank and others. And 5, the believer must not appear to be who he really is. So you can see how, this doctrine of theirs of infiltration. And infiltration, it's just so underhanded, but it's so effective. And that's how the most evil people in the world have been able to co-opt and take over world religions and turn them into other, things that they're really not. And this is all for destroying religion so they can usher in their one world religion. And as you can see, these people are very evil. So, this last belief justified, the believer must not appear what he really is. This justified its followers' pursuit of the double type of life that they led. One could appear to be a religious Jew on the outside, and in reality be a Frankist. For though the Donma, which really means, it means those who change, they officially converted to Islam and the Frankists to Catholicism, and the great majority of the Frankists who outwardly appeared to embrace Judaism integrated themselves into the Jewish community. So, despite the fact that they were all outwardly religious, they still cherished as their goal the annihilation of every religion and positive system of belief. And they dreamed of a general revolution that would sweep away the past in a single stroke so that the world might be rebuilt. So, this is definitely the Anti-Self and the Bavarian Illuminati just, took this and even evolved it even more. Now, let's take a look at the Sabbatian-Frankist and the Rothschilds in Israel. It's very important that we see how all this connects. And I'm actually just going to read a section out of my book, the Antichrist and his cult. So here we go. Sabbatai Zevi taught that his followers would return to their Jewish homeland on the ancient location of Israel. And this was pursued by this cult. Later within this cult, those such as the Rothschilds began to invent a mythical history about the kingdom of David and a racial connection back to biblical Israel. This was supported by their religious belief that the Jewish Messiah would come one day and draw them back to Jerusalem and establish his kingdom. This was opposed by Orthodox Jews who did not support this ideology of Zionism and the state of Israel. And most Jews of the 19th century did not share this belief either. But a movement to spread this narrative was backed politically and financially to push for the spread of the political philosophy of Zionism and the right of the Jewish people to seize their quote-unquote historical right to the land of Palestine. This was politically pushed by British Foreign Secretary Palmerston, who wrote to the British ambassador in the Islamic Turkey-based Ottoman Empire, which controlled Palestine in 1840, and encouraged the support of the Jews who were dispersed throughout Europe to return to Palestine. Lord Palmerston just happened to be the Grand Patriarch of the Grand Orient Freemasonry. Imagine that. Which was the elite version controlled by the Sabbatian-Frankists. This campaign continued throughout the 19th century with the financial backing that pushed for academics and historians to push the fraudulent narrative. This culminated at the end of the century with the establishment by the Rothschilds of Zionism. The push was to get the Jewish people throughout the world to support this version of going back to their homeland, but most of them opposed it. There were early Zionist attempts that advocated for a homeland, but not necessarily one in Palestine. Uganda and Argentina were discussed, and many were okay with that, but Palestine was the one they committed to. The World Zionist Organization with Theodor Herzl got support from Edmund de Rothschild. The Rothschilds demanded control of Jewish settlements and established a structure of administration which still calls the shots in Israel today. The Rothschilds were essential for the establishment of Israel. Being Sabbatian-Frankists, they manipulated events that led to World War I and funding all sides and exploited to secure the Balfour Declaration in 1917, in which the British foreign government pledged to support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. So basically, the Rothschilds created the state of Israel for their own benefit. As for the Rothschilds in Israel, it would be accurate to say that Israel is basically the Rothschilds' private country, with their own private military and headquarters, for influencing and manipulating the world to usher in the New World Order. Now, as pointed out, the Rothschilds are Sabbatian-Frankists. They're Satanist. And this cult is where the Antichrist, the false Messiah, will apparently come from. False messiahs from this cult follow a certain lineage and succession, and the Rothschilds appear to be part of this lineage, and may even fill the role of the Antichrist in the end times during the Great Tribulation, as prophesied in the Bible. Jack Manuelian gives some very interesting information on this. He said, quote, "Another main Sabbatian belief is that the Godhead takes human form, which allowed for leaders of the sect to be incarnated into the Godhead from Sabbatai Zevi through Frank and others." As I just quoted that from Gershom Shalom, a little bit ago. So, when Frankists convert to Christianity and Dogma convert to Islam, their God does not become like Jesus Christ and the Christian Trinity, and doesn't become Muhammad and his Allah, but the Godhead of the Sabbatian-Frankists included members of the sect. Therefore, Sabbatai was their first incarnate God. After him was Jacob Frank. He became their incarnate God. And after Frank, this satanic reign apparently passed to the Rothschilds. And now their incarnate God is either a Rothschild God-man, or they're waiting on his incarnation and manifestation among them, like it's made clear in Protocols of Zion. Now, let's look at Jacob Frank and Catholicism. Jacob Frank, he targeted the Roman Catholic Church from the start, and he was so persuasive in his claims to be a dissident Jew that the church funded his work and allowed him to convert thousands of apparent followers of Judaism into Catholicism. So by the year 1790, 26,000 Jews were recorded baptized in Poland. Sabbatian-Frankists were not, of course, really converts. They were just imposters, infiltrating Catholic hierarchy to take over the reins of power through, covert cells and high positions in the church, including the papacy. Now, we see the influence of the pedophilia practicing Sabbatian-Frankists today with the constant revelations about mass child abuse by Catholic priests, which, at the same time is being exploited by the same Sabbatian-Frankist cult in order to destroy the church. Child abuse, that is a calling card of Sabbatian-Frankists, and has also, this has made the news within the Hasidic, community in Brooklyn, New York, where cover-ups are widespread with internal laws against reporting any of the number to the police. And so Rabbi Marvin Attelman said that a lesser-known fact about Jacob Frank is that he also converted Islam 2 years before his conversion to Catholicism. A golden rule of this cult was and is that the believer must not appear as he really is. And this applies to politics and other walks of life, not only religion. And so this leads up into my next video is going to be on the papacy and how the Catholic Church has been infiltrated by the Illuminati. And it's going to be very, very interesting, folks, and probably it's not going to make a lot of Catholics too happy. But this is stuff that's got to be recognized, because I see a lot of Catholics that just don't understand how their church has been infiltrated and how Freemasonry played a huge part. And I got to give credit to former popes. They recognized this modernism that was seeping into the church, how the Illuminati, through Freemasonry, was trying to take over. And, they used socialism and communism as one of the ideologies to do it. And so there was a lot of popes that they wrote they wrote papal bulls and letters and stuff trying to warn the church. The church didn't take heed for it, but I'll get into all that in part 4. And so, folks, please, if you're listening to this on BitChute, I will leave a link in the description box below to my channel on YouTube. I've been trying to get that one started. I realize that it's highly censored and stuff, but I'm wanting to get as many videos on YouTube as I can sharing this type of information. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe to the link in the description box for my BitChute channel. I mean, it's important that YouTubers understand that there are platforms out there that's free speech, that's not censored by a bunch of people working for the cabal. But anyway, I appreciate y'all. Take care. Have a good day.